Here.
Assemblymember Peterson.
Here.
Assemblymember Naboski.
Present.
Assemblymember Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Chair Flynn.
Present.
Assemblymember Dick Trainee.
Here.
Dick Trainee, or Assemblymember Trainee is participating telephonically. Assemblymember Evans.
Here.
Assemblymember Steele.
Here.
Assemblymember Johnston. Here. Assemblymember Honeman.
Here.
Assemblymember Hall.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Mrs. Johnston, would you kindly lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. Thank you for working with us on scheduling for our budget work sessions. We look forward to seeing everyone on Friday, and we'll get, I think, quite a bit of a ways through the budget. There's really not a whole lot of changes from last year, so I think we'll have a fairly seamless process. And then also tomorrow, look forward to attending the APD graduation ceremony. We've got 20 new officers who have made it through the first phase of training will become field training out in the field here after Wednesday, and pleased to be able to add to the ranks of our police department. So with that, that's all for today, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Chair's report, very brief. Obviously, Ms. Gray Jackson has kindly acceded to serve as Vice Chair, and because Mr. Trainee is participating telephonically this evening. Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. I would just want to reiterate on the agenda, item 14G is the master plan that involves the Montefiore discussion that we've been having for a while now. We did postpone it to our meeting in March at our last meeting, and so although we have to have it on the agenda, we cannot take action on it. I just want to make sure that everyone's clear on that before we get started. The other item I want to mention, just to sort of elaborate on the mayor's comment on the budget discussion, we will have our first work session on the proposed budget this Friday, the 10th, from 1 to 4 p.m. We'll go through all of the departmental budgets. We will then have a subsequent work session on the 17th, where we'll go through the enterprise fund, or the enterprise activities, both capital and operating budgets, and then through the municipal capital budget. And then we've set aside some time on the 24th for any overflow. So if we don't get all the questions answered, if there's questions that are engendered by those conversations, we'll take them up at that time prior to starting our public hearing process. I do want to emphasize again how important it is that our newer members get the opportunity to ask a lot of questions and help develop that body of knowledge that they'll need as we transition into a new administration next year. So feel free to dig in. We've added time that we wouldn't normally have because of that effort to transfer knowledge to the newer members. So with that, we're on to committee reports. Mr. Starr.
No report.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No report this evening.
Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As members of the Assembly will see, item 9, Delta 14, is an update in the Eberhardt matter. I won't go through it, but essentially it's going to adjust all the timetables since the hearing has been moved from what was going to be September to, or was it October? I've already lost track. September to December. And with that, I also would like to make a disclosure, if I may. I'm just going to make a broad one because my husband is an Anchorage firefighter.
Really?
He is, and a member of Local 1264. And Mr. Chairman, the budgets have been introduced, so there may be pieces and parts of AFD budget within all these, though I believe my husband's salary and his position is de minimis in comparison to the rest of the budget, so I'll just put that in front of you for a ruling.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. As before, given that you don't get to individually determine his salary as a member of this Assembly, and frankly, this Assembly doesn't get to determine his individual salary, you will be compelled to participate. Are there any questions or concerns about that ruling? Seeing and hearing none, congratulations, Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, and I have nothing else, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like for everyone to know that the Budget and Finance Committee meetings for both October and November will be canceled because we have a lot on our table dealing with the 2015 budget, and I feel that we can postpone having a meeting for those 2 months, and we'll resume our meetings in December. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. I'm counting on you to chair the meeting this Friday, so don't let me down. Mr. Trainee, anything?
Just that we're meeting on the towing ordinance, and our goal is to have that passed in November. So the new licenses will operate with the new towing ordinance to get online.
Thank you, sir.
We'll be hearing in November on that.
Very good. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The ad hoc committee on the chronic inebriate and homelessness met last week. We had several presentations from the Anchorage Community Mental Health Authority and from the CAP team of the APD, as well as 4 actually testimonials, I would say, from persons who were chronic inebriates and homeless for an extended period of time who have since turned things around as to what worked for them and what programs worked. Most importantly, we had a pretty full conference room. There had to be 40 to 50 just people in attendance, stakeholders, and people interested in this issue. And our next meeting is the first Thursday of next month.
Thank you, sir. Glad to hear there's a fair amount of interest in this issue. Mr. Steele.
No report this evening.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Johnston. Mrs. Johnston.
Yes, we received our monthly update as far as support and ML&P's construction projects, and they're both looking on time and maybe even early. And I think the committee as a whole felt good about the reports. I need to ask to be excused. I'm going to try to call in on the budget meetings. I'm doing a family trip from the 8th to the 18th. Plus, I see Mr. Morrison out there. We're going to a Angel Fund roundtable on Thursday in Boston. So I will not be able to be here or to chair the enterprise, but I'm taking my big overnight backpack with my notebooks in them so I can read them on the plane. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnston. We'll try to channel your feelings for us. Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just want to make sure that I had it in my calendar. I confirm the graduation for the APD Academy is Thursday the 9th, 3 o'clock at William Marston Theater. Thursday, not tomorrow. Secondly, the Public Safety Committee is scheduled for next Wednesday, the 15th, however, not available. So I did confirm with 3/4 of the Public Safety Committee, and it looks like we're going to postpone the meeting or reschedule it to October 22nd, Wednesday, October 22nd. I suspect we'll probably have some conversation about the Taxi Cab Commission, particularly in response to the Uber movement we have in Anchorage, as well as the towing ordinance. We may have scheduled public commentary on the first draft of the towing ordinance change. So look forward to that. And we'll meet here in the same conference room between this Assembly Chambers and the Lusag Library.
I see Ms. Domboski
William Marston.
in queue. Do you have a question for Mr. Honeman?
No, I was just thinking Mr. Honeman was probably going to give us an update on the Transportation Committee, too.
Yes, and we did have the meeting, here last week, and 3 of the 4 members made it. One of the Mat-Su Borough members was unavailable. We had presentations by a long-range transportation planner for the municipality regarding the federal funding. We also had presentation from Mr. Wilbur and his staff, reference the People Mover, and a representative from the Valley Mover as well. It was a good dialogue. We have some to-dos to do, and then we would like to have schedule a joint meeting of the entire body of both. I do believe we have twice-a-year meetings with the Mat-Su Borough anyway. We may have this on our agenda with a presentation at the next scheduled meeting. So the next meeting we are awaiting to hear back from the Mat-Su Valley. The co-chair of the Mat-Su Borough will be contacting us with a date. I'm thinking more likely in December.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. And just to clarify for the clerk, that was October 22nd is your planned next public safety meeting?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hall.
No report.
Thank you, sir. That brings us to the addendum to the agenda. May I please have a motion to incorporate?
Move to incorporate.
Second.
This will be a little bit of light reading, folks, so relax. We have item 9 Delta 2A, AIM, Assembly Memorandum 589-2014, and Assembly Information Memorandum 143-2014, a statement of non-objection from Abbott Loop Community Council, sponsored by myself, apparently. Item 9, Delta 3, Assembly Memorandum 590-2014, and items 3A and B, they are Assembly Information Memorandums 141-2014 and 142-2014. These are resolutions from the Mountain View Community Council and a statement of non-objection from the Airport Heights Community Council. Item 9, Delta 14, AIM 615-2014, a remand of Eberhardt et al. v. Municipality of Anchorage from some member Dembosky. 9, Delta 15, AM 616-2014, an Arts Advisory Commission appointment of Steve Wounded Deer Alvarez from the Mayor's Office. Item 9, Delta 16, AM 617-2014, a Port Commission appointment of Andrew S. McLeod from the Mayor's Office. We have item 9, Foxtrot 13, AO 2014-118, an ordinance municipality of Anchorage adopting and appropriating funds for the 2015 general government operating budget for the municipality of Anchorage from the Office of Management and Budget. Public hearings will be on November 5 and November 18 of 2014. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 553-2014. 9, Foxtrot 14 is AO 2014-119, ordinance adopting and appropriating funds for the 2015 municipal utilities and enterprise activities operating budgets and the 2015 municipal utilities enterprise activities capital budgets. Again, public hearings on the 5th and 18th of November, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 554-2014. Item 9, Foxtrot 15, AR 2014-250, resolution approving the 2015 through 2020 municipal utilities enterprise activities capital improvement programs, also brought to us by the Office of Management and Budget. Public hearings again on the 5th and 18th of November, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 558-2014. Item 9F16, AO 2014-120, an ordinance adopting and appropriating funds for the 2015 operating capital budgets of the Anchorage Community Development Authority, brought to us by the Office of Management and Budget. Public hearings again on the 5th and 18th of November, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 555-2014. 9F17 is AO 2014-121, an ordinance adopting the 2015 general government capital improvement budget from the Office of Management and Budget. Public hearings again on the 5th and 18th of November, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 556-2014. 9F18 is AR 2014-249, a resolution adopting the 2015 through 2020 general government capital improvement program from OMB. Public hearings again on the 5th and 18th of November, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 557-2014. AO 9 Foxtrot 19 is Anchorage Ordinance 2014-134, an ordinance of the Municipality of Anchorage amending the Hillside District Plan Use Map 2.1 to reclassify lands to low-intensity detached. I'm presuming this is greater than 3 to 5 acres of use classification for property generally located at the northeast corner of Lake Codas Parkway and Huffman Roads intersection, and amending Anchorage Code 21-01-080, new code, Planning and Zoning Commission case 2014-01-05, brought to us by the Community Development Department. The public hearing on this will be on November 18th. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 618-2014. And finally, 9F20, AR 2014-285, a resolution appropriating when tendered $141,631 United States Department of Interior Geological Survey grant to Merrill Field's Operating Fund 580 for the continued use of 1209 Orca Street as the USGS Hydrological Resource Center at the Merrill Field Airport. The public hearing on this will be on October 21 of 2014. It's accompanied by some memorandum 619-2014. Are there any other items do we have some laid on the table items? We do. You guys are killing me. All right. The first is laid on the table items, item 13B. It's a Planning and Zoning Commission Resolution 2014-050, resolution recommending approval of an amendment to the Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21, Land Use Planning, new code effective January 1, 2014, prohibiting palisade-style fences with pales or points. We have laid on the table item 13B2, AO 2014-92S. This is an ordinance of Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Title 21, Land Use Planning for fences under Section 21-07-080 of the new Title 21 Code and for fences under Section 21-.45.110 of the old Title 21 Code to prohibit metal palisade-style fences with pales or points. And finally, I hope, laid on the table item 14F1, Municipality of Anchorage Planning and Zoning Commission Resolution 2014-54, a resolution urging the Anchorage Assembly and the administration to extend the old Title 21 until December 31st of 2015. One moment, folks. I may have one more. Mr. Vacalis, the clerk informs me there may be an S version for the ACDA budget that I'm supposed to read into the record. Are you aware of that, sir?
Mr. Chairman, we have been talking to them. There's a slight $600 difference. We're going to talk to them tomorrow and perhaps read it into the record the next meeting. We're talking about $600.
Good enough. All right. With that, is there anything else? Seeing and hearing nothing, we need a vote on incorporating those items into the agenda. Please proceed. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. With that, we're ready to pull some items. Mr. Starr.
No, other than the Eberhard matter, just log me as abstained if it doesn't get pulled.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Starr. Madam Clerk, please show Mr. Starr as abstaining from item 9 Delta 14, please. Okay, we'll have Ms. Demboski pull it so we can do that officially. 9 Delta 14. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 9A4 and 9F8.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Demboski.
9 Alpha 2 for reading and 9 Delta 14.
Thank you, Ms. Demboski. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to pull several items, but the first one would be 9 Apple 5. The next one would be 9D7, Delta 7. The next one would be 9 Frank 4. And I believe that's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Ms. Gray Jackson. What was the last one? You said 9F4?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Trainee.
Nothing, sir.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Evans.
Yes, Mr. Chair, 9 Alpha 1 for reading.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Steele.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have, what about? 9 Alpha 3 for reading. Did we already pull that?
Thank you, sir.
9 Alpha 3 for reading.
Alpha 3, sir?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Johnston.
No items, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Mr. Honeman.
9 Echo 1 on the regular agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. And Mr. Hall.
Yes, 9 Alpha 2 has already been pulled, hasn't it?
That is correct.
Okay, 9B2.
9 Bravo 2. Thank you, Mr.
9
Hall.
Bravo 2.
Okay, let me run through these real quickly and make sure I caught everything. I have 9 Alpha 1, 9 Alpha 2, 9 Alpha 3, 9 Alpha 4, 9 Alpha 5, 9 Bravo 2, 9 Delta 7, 9 Delta 14 on the addendum, 9 Echo 1, 9 Foxtrot 4, and 9 Foxtrot 8. Did I miss anything? I did. Okay. With that, may I please have a motion to approve the balance of the consent agenda minus those items pulled? It's been moved and seconded. Please proceed to vote on the balance of the agenda. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. That motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 9 Alpha 1. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have Mr. Lamoureux.
Will you kindly make a motion, sir?
Chief.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. I see no objection. That motion is approved. Mr. Evans.
It's a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing citizen George Lamoureux for the Anchorage Police Department Partners in Public Safety Citizens Award for Valor. Whereas, on August 24th, 2013, citizen George Lamoureux joined several APD officers to respond to a catastrophic crash of a Cessna 150 aircraft at Merrill Field. And whereas the officers and citizen George Lamoureux immediately recognized that there were 2 people on board still trapped in the wreckage and that smoke was rapidly filling the passenger compartment from a fire in the engine compartment. And whereas the officers and citizen George Lamoureux ran to the burning aircraft without regard to their own safety, knowing the aircraft could explode at any moment. And whereas citizen George Lamoureux worked the fire extinguisher while the officers worked to extricate the 2 occupants from the wreckage. And whereas, although neither of the occupants survived, the efforts of these officers and civilian George Lamoureux demonstrated courage and compassion despite danger to themselves. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly hereby recognizes and applauds citizen George Lamoureux with the Anchorage Police Department Partners in Public Safety Citizens Award for Valor, passed and approved by the Anchorage Municipal Assembly this 7th day of October, 2014.
I won't reread the narrative here because you know what this is about, but as we want to join the Municipal Assembly, we at the APD wish to present Mr. Lamoureux with a Citizen Certificate of Valor and a plaque commemorating his good service. Mr. Lamoureux risked his own life to save the lives to try and save the lives of the occupants of the aircraft. He also provided cover to allow our officers to safely try and get the victims out of the plane. Without him providing the assistance, suppressing the flames with a fire extinguisher, our guys wouldn't have been able to get in there, and the whole thing might have gone up, and many more people might have been killed. So we're really appreciative of the fact that George was there to help us out that day, and I want to offer him my personal thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Lamoureux, we have a phrase, of course, no good deed goes unpunished. You had a couple questions. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you. I just want to, again, on behalf of the entire municipality, say thank you for what you did for your community. But I'd like to turn the mic also over to Ms. Guyard. She has a personal relationship to this story.
Ms. Guyard?
Mr. Lamoureux, I don't know if you remember me, but you were trying to sell Barton and I a car that day. And
I did not know that it was you.
And what the public doesn't know is that in the midst of trying to sell us the car, you ordered us into that car and you drove furiously to the fence that was about 10 or 12 feet high, and you scaled that fence, including over the top of it was amazing what you achieved. And you ran to that plane and you immediately took charge, and you really were very, very brave. So I was a personal witness, and I know Barton would want to join me in saying thank you for what you did. It's very brave.
Mr. Honeman?
I just wanted to say we go way back. I know we've known each other since Kentucky Fried Chicken days. We used to hang out at the same location back in the 70s. And so I know you've been a successful businessman, but you've also been a great citizen of the community, and we thank you for stepping up when it was your time to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lammer. If you wish to offer us any words of wisdom, we'd be delighted to hear them.
Well, I just want to say thank you. It was completely unexpected. I had no idea I was going to get this award. I'm very grateful for it, but I can tell you there are many, many, many unsung heroes that have done this and much more than what I have that will never be up in front of you to receive one of these awards. But I want to thank you for taking the time, effort, and energy to do so. Thank you very much, and may God bless all of you.
Thank you, sir. That brings us to item 9, Alpha 2.
Move to approve.
Second.
Seeing no objection, that item is approved.
Mr. Roseborough, are you here?
Come on
down. A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing citizen Lonell Michael Roseborough for the Anchorage Police Department's Partners in Public Safety Citizens Award for Valor. Whereas on January 7th, 2014, citizen Lonell Roseborough was outside the Glacier Brew House restaurant when he heard people yelling about a male with a knife. And whereas citizen Lonell Roseborough saw the suspect and observed that he had stabbed another male in the head, and whereas without hesitation or concern for his own risk, citizen Lonell Roseborough reacted to the aggression and immediately grabbed the knife away from the suspect. And whereas when the suspect attempted to flee, citizen Lonell Roseborough was able to restrain him until police arrived and took him into custody. And whereas the victim was rushed to the hospital where he was later determined that the knife blade was inside his head, and whereas the intervention and quick reactions of citizen Lonell Roseborough helped prevent further possible harm to the victims and other citizens that night, now therefore the Anchorage Assembly hereby recognizes and applauds citizen Lonell Michael Roseborough with the Anchorage Police Department's Partners in Public Safety Citizen Award for Valor, passed and approved by the Anchorage Municipal Assembly this 7th day of October 2014.
We have something to say here as well. Once again, it's my honor to represent the Anchorage Police Department and thank Mr. Roseborough for what he did that night. Not only did he assist in actually rescue the man, prevent him from being most likely killed, but he disarmed the suspect and effected a citizen's arrest. We all had to show up and do the paperwork. You know, we have an academy starting in May. There's still plenty of time to apply. And you can put this on your resume. So, it's my pleasure on behalf of the men and women of the Anchorage Police Department to present you with the Citizen Certificate of Valor. Thank you. Thank you. Take the obligatory picture.
And Mr. Roseborough, Mr. Honeman has a question or a comment for you. I'm not sure which.
Just a comment as chair of the Public Safety Committee and someone been in law enforcement for a number of years. It's refreshing that someone in the middle of the night in a hazardous situation would step up. So I thank you for that. It's a pretty brave thing to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Roseborough, the floor is yours if you have any words of wisdom for us.
I would just like to thank the city of Anchorage, for the love and the support, and my friends and family, my coworkers. Thank y'all for coming out and supporting me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, we appreciate your honor and your willingness to personally sacrifice yourself on behalf of citizens of Anchorage. So thank you.
I'll do it again.
And that brings us to item 9 Alpha 3. Mr. Steele.
Thank you. Is there someone here to accept the nomination or to speak on behalf of the nomination for Filipino American History Month, celebrating Filipino American? There's not. I'll read it.
If you kindly make the motion. Okay, moved and seconded.
I move.
Okay, and seeing no objection, that matter is approved. So go ahead, Mr. Steele.
I move the resolution. Anchorage Municipal Assembly using the people of Anchorage, Alaska, urging them to recognize, celebrate the Filipino American History Month as a time to review efforts towards the research and examination of history and the culture in order to provide an opportunity for all people in Alaska to learn and to appreciate more about the Filipino Americans and their historic contribution to Anchorage, Alaska. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Assembly resolves that the citizens of Anchorage are encouraged to observe October 2014 as Filipino American History Month as a time to renew efforts towards the research and examination of history and culture in order to provide an opportunity for all people in Alaska to learn and appreciate more about Filipino Americans and their historic contribution to Anchorage, Alaska, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly the 7th day of October 2014.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. That brings us to item 9 Alpha 4. Mr. Peterson.
I move 9 Alpha 4.
Second.
So moved and seconded. Seeing no objection, that item is approved. Mr. Peterson, do we have somebody here to receive this?
Is there someone here from
for Breast Cancer Awareness Month?
American Cancer Society or anything?
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Peterson. Just go ahead. You can read, I suppose.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
There was supposed to be someone here, and I was going to read, but since they aren't here, I would feel really privileged if you would allow me to read it.
By all means, please.
The whole thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing October 2014 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month and encouraging everyone to work together as a community to increase public awareness and to educate the population about early detection. Whereas more than 232,670 new cases of breast cancer are diagnosed each year in the United States. Whereas about 1 in 8 women, just under 12%, will develop invasive breast cancer over the course of their lifetimes. And whereas about 2,360 new cases of invasive breast cancer were expected to be diagnosed in men in 2014. And whereas, although death rates from breast cancer have been declining since 1989, about 40,000 people will die from breast cancer. And whereas the death rate decrease is thought to be the result of treatment advances, early detection, and increased awareness. And whereas there are more than 2.5 million breast cancer survivors in the United States. And whereas breast cancer affects every person within the municipality of Anchorage, whether as a victim or survivor of breast cancer, or as a family member, significant other, neighbor, or co-worker. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly resolves that October 2014 is recognized as Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and due to the prevalence of breast cancer and its devastating effects, encourages everyone to work together as a community to increase public awareness and to educate the population about early detection. Passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly the 7th day of October, 2014.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. That brings us to item 9 Alpha 5.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Is anybody here from the Hispanic Heritage?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Right. Before I present this and it's read, I'd like to make a correction on line 35, and I'm sorry it wasn't done earlier.
Quite all right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On line 35, Hispanic-American Heritage Month. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So noted. May I have a second to Ms. Gray Jackson's motion?
Second.
Is there objection? Seeing and hearing none, that amendment is approved, and I see no objection to the resolution, so that is approved as well.
This is a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing and celebrating September 15th through October 15th, 2014 as Hispanic American Heritage Month in Anchorage, Alaska. Whereas Hispanic Americans are celebrating with various events throughout Anchorage, including Hispanic Heritage Celebration with a free day at Anchorage Museum on October 12th. Now, therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizes and celebrates September 15th through October 15th, 2014 as Hispanic American Heritage Month, passed and approved by the Anchorage Assembly this 7th day of October 2014.
Welcome, sir. Please introduce yourself and tell us about what's going on.
Sure. My name's Arthur Sosa, and on behalf of the Hispanic Affairs Council of Alaska, I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to recognize the Hispanics here in Anchorage as well as Alaska. It's definitely an honor for you to be recognizing this day, and just want to thank you again for that. Thank you.
Our pleasure, Mr. Sosa. I believe, Ms. Johnson, are you in queue to ask him a question?
Or just a moment of pride. I happen to be the grandmother of 2 half Peruvians. So very interested in your month. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, sir.
And I'd like to say gracias.
De nada. All right. That brings us to item 9, Bravo 2, Mr. Hall.
Move to postpone indefinitely.
Second.
Press your buttons, gentlemen. Okay, please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gray Jackson? And that's postponed indefinitely. That brings us to item 9, Delta 14, Ms. Demboski. Oh, did I? I'm sorry, I apologize. Yes, yep, you're correct. Thank you. Ms. Gray Jackson, item 9, Delta 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the request of our CFO, I move to postpone this item indefinitely.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
And that carries unanimously. Now we're on to 9 Delta 14. Thank you for the correction. Mrs. Demboski.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Starr, you are excused from participating in this matter. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. So 10 yeas and 0 nays, that motion carries. That brings us to item 9F4. Ms. Gray Jackson.
9 Echo 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that one too. Correct. Thank you. Mr. Honeman, 9 Echo 1.
Move to accept. It's a resolution.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make a point. I'm sure my colleagues have read this, but just the community council, it's pretty rare we see these, but they're experiencing some high crime in the Airport Heights area and concerned about that. So I think the chief was pretty eloquent when he said he invited the two gentlemen presented tonight with an academy coming up. But I'd urge that we consider strongly future police academies in 2015 as we prepare for our budget. This is starting to repeat itself all across town. So just want to highlight that crime is on the rise in some areas, and we really do need to adequately staff our police department. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Honeman, for pulling this item because I was going to. It happened to be Mr. Trainee and my community council. And I want to thank the administration, in particular the police department, because someone, I can't remember the sergeant's name, came to our community council and talked to, there were about 35 people there, I believe, and talked to them about the issues, the escalating crime issues in their neighborhood. But frankly, crime is escalating throughout this community, period, even right next door to where I live. But besides that, one of the things I want to mention in their request is that we provide funding to get some neighborhood crime watch signs made to be placed when communities decide that and make efforts that they want to participate in a neighborhood crime watch to help protect themselves. They need the signs to put up so that the criminals will be a little bit fearful. So I just wanted to mention that, and I'm hopeful that during the 2015 budget process we can get a little bit of money in there so that we can get those signs for our community members. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Mayor, you want to chime in on that one?
Yes, thank you. Just for Mr. Honeman's edification, there is a police academy in the budget, and hope the Assembly will agree with the administration that we need to hold one.
Yeah, I recognize one that we're hoping at the Public Safety Committee it was presented that there might be a need to perhaps run one later in the fall as well. So I'm just reminding my colleagues, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Please proceed on to vote on accepting this informational line item. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
That carries unanimously. That brings us to item 9, Foxtrot 4. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the request of the administration, I would like to move to change the public hearing date from November 5th of this year to January 18 next year, 2015. Wow.
I think it was actually November 18, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Is it November 18th?
Yeah.
Okay, I missed the one. I'm sorry.
Second.
November 18th. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And we actually need if you could start, Ms. Gray Jackson. Motion to enter.
Move to introduce.
Second.
That was the thing. Okay, we got a motion and a second. Ms. Gray Jackson, are you the third?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I'm the third. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the motion is to then postpone the public hearing to November 18. Mr. Evans?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering what the reason was for the postponement of this.
Actually, I asked for it so that it can go in front of Planning and Zoning. Was this the one?
No, if I may.
I got the wrong one.
Yeah, if I may, please. This is so that the item on the addendum, which is item F19, can be heard at the same time as this.
Anything else, Mr. Evans?
Yeah, and F19 is the change to the Hillside District Plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how long are we postponing this? Bill?
2 weeks to the 18th of November from the 5th. Okay. All right. So the motion is to postpone the public hearing on this item until November 18. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And that carries unanimously. That brings us to item 9F8. Mr. Peterson.
Move to approve.
That's actually a motion introduced, please.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Please press the button, sir. Mr. Peterson, Ms. Domboski, and Mr.
Third.
Oden was the third. Thank you, sir. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to be interested in being listed as a co-sponsor on this resolution.
We can do that.
Thank you.
And that wraps up our work on the consent agenda for the evening. Rather than diving into the depths of the Chugach State Park Access Plan at this moment, we will take our break and be back in about 20 to 25 minutes. Thank you. I'd like to call the Assembly back to order. On our agenda, we're on item 11A. I've been advised during the break we have some procedural matters that need to be addressed. Mr. Wheeler, could you please speak to the referral, a review that's necessary before we finalize our efforts on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Under Title 21, the Assembly created the Chugach River Advisory Board. That board has functions very similar to some of our other land use boards, including being charged with reviewing and making recommendations on changes to the comp plan that affect their area. In this case, this plan is an amendment to the comp plan. It is part of the comp plan, and therefore, it needs to go to that board for review and recommendation back to the Assembly.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. And my understanding is from Mr. Stars that that particular board can convene and consider this within the next 4 weeks. Is that correct, Mr. Starr?
Yeah, they're on demand. It's a 5-member board, so we're going to need 30 days.
Okay. So with that, Mr. Starr, might I please have a motion to postpone consideration of this matter to November 5?
Move the action on 2014-101S to November 5th.
Second.
Kindly press your buttons. Are there any questions on this? Is everyone clear what we're doing here? Okay. Seeing no questions, please proceed to vote. Mr. Traney.
Yes.
And that carries unanimously. I know there's a lot of people who are interested in seeing this move quickly, and I apologize. We simply had a procedural error that we have to address before we can finalize our action on this. That brings us to item 13A, AR 2014-191, a resolution of Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving the location of a drive-through coffee shop on Tract 5 and a drive-through donut shop on Tract 6 per AO 2001-24S, the Alaska Village Subdivision Plat, 2006-169, Zone B3 SL, General Business District, with special limitations in the Creekside Business Plan Unit Development, generally located at the southwest corner of DeBar Road and Muldoon Road, in Anchorage, in the Northeast Community Council, case 2014-54, brought to us by the Community Development Department. This is accompanied by a supplemental memorandum 409-2014, is continued from August 26th meeting. This is a public hearing, a continued public hearing, so if you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward at this time. Tomas, welcome back.
Thank you. I guess I'm already loud here this far from the microphone. Good evening. Thank you for taking on this matter, Mr. Chair and Assemblymen and Assemblywomen. I'm here to state the same thing I did on August 26th. This project is, in our view at least, is overdue to be approved. We have been asked to attend meetings with Community Council, which we have conducted, and in September we got a resolution which supports the case with concerns which are not necessarily concerns this project can address. We have an approved site plan, as you have been reviewing the case and you're aware of. We have gotten through the public process, and we're ready to get the approval, and I would request that to happen today. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Very good.
I did not state my name, which
You were right, you did. I was going to ask you.
So my name is Tamás Deák. I guess I'm very eager to get going here. The last name is spelled D-E-A-K. I'm the petitioner's representative, KPB Architects Design Team principal there. And I think that covers it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomas. And we may ask you to stop and say hi to Mary Ellen and write your name down, because
yes,
you have a unique spelling. Mr. Honeman has a question for you.
Comment and a question. Thank you, Mr. Diak. The September Community Council resolution, do you recall their concerns that addressed, I want to say it had something to do with a traffic matter off of DeBar Road as it approaches Midland?
Correct.
And just for the record, that doesn't have anything to do with this particular development. But I just wanted to say that, you put a lot of effort in it. I appreciate you going to the Community Council and updating them. As you know, that this actual town center concept in 2001 with a lot of conditions on it was hopefully be taken very seriously, and we think you did a pretty good job of making sure that those conditions were met. So
thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The resolution that the Northeast Community Council passed in regards to this was dealing with the farthest east access point on DeBar Road, and in the plans, it's listed as a right in, right out only. But since if you take a right out of there, you're only a little over 120 feet from the intersection of Muldoon and DeBar, and the Community Council felt that it would be better if it was right turn in only, and there would be no right turn out. That way we would avoid snarls in traffic and potential accidents. It's a public safety issue.
If I may address that. Yes, actually that driveway is one of the only driveways which is in existence with the Alaska Village subdivision as it was developed, and that's going to be the only one which will remain on its in its location. It's on an approved plat. The plat has been reviewed by the municipal departments. It was deemed to be right-in, right-out for reasons of traffic. It is about 120 feet from the intersection, which is a controlled intersection of Muldoon and the Bar Roads. And I yet to see a reasonable development where you have right-in but no way to get out of a project. This was definitely part of the planning process to have those access points from the bar. And your purview, although you have obviously ultimate oversight of these issues, is approval of the drive-throughs. We have gone through the Planning and Zoning Commission to have this site plan reviewed, and there was no comments regarding this issue. There were no comments regarding this issue because they have been reviewed previously with the plat.
Mr. Peterson, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, and originally this was reviewed back in about 2001, and since that point in time, the traffic increase is 2 or 3 times on that corner what it was back then. That's why the Community Council felt it was imperative that we not set up a situation where we're going to have a large number of accidents. They were especially worried about someone taking a right out onto DeBar Road and then trying to cross several lanes of traffic so that they could take a left on Muldoon Road. Because if they had to go left on Muldoon, there was no way for them to do that without crossing lanes of traffic or going to Muldoon and taking a right and then finding somewhere to make a U-turn. And there is a light at Creekside Center Drive on DeBar, so anyone who wanted to get out of there, all they had to do was drive over to that light and they would have safe and easy access onto DeBar Road. That's why they felt that a right turn in only made sense.
We're sort of sliding into debate here, Mr. Peterson. I'm going to move on to Mr. Honeman.
Is someone from traffic engineering here tonight?
Let's Mr. Tomas.
Yes, nothing from Mr. Jones.
Anything else, sir, before?
Yeah, I would like to again emphasize that that this project site plan has not been brought to the Community Council as a first review. This project site plan has been through various site plan reviews based on a plat which was actually recorded in 2006. Prior to the plat recordation, there are duties of all departments, in this case the State of Alaska, which is the overseer of Muldoon Road and the Bar Road in this section. And the ultimate subdivision agreement, which was developed following the process for getting the subdivision actually started and the infrastructure built, did require certain traffic conditions and traffic mitigation issues to be constructed. One of them is at the Fred Meyer access. Basically what they did is limit the left out. That's how this and other intersections became right-in, right-out intersections, and that's how they were proposed. So we certainly are not in favor of limiting another access from the bar, especially when this has been reviewed. This has been reviewed, and the concern perhaps stems from an accident which was on the corner of the Bar and Muldoon, which is a controlled intersection 100-something feet away from this corner.
Thank you, sir. I see no further questions.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak to us on this matter? Seeing and hearing none, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
I'll move to approve.
Moved and seconded. Mr. Honeman.
Mr. Chair, I don't know is there someone here from the traffic engineering department? That was the first question.
There is not.
Okay. I would just request that the traffic engineer review this particular plan. And with what Mr. Peterson said earlier, in 2001 was the last master plan review of this. I mean, notwithstanding the site plan review Mr. Diakis addressed in 2006. And I noted in the record in the file that the state of Alaska was consulted on 4 or 5 locations, referenced these permits for access onto the state control roadway. And to be fair, the town square design, town center design in Muldoon and DeBar, as conceptually designed and platted, and it's an ordinance back in 2001. This particular development, and it was noted through the planning department, is not necessarily, in the conformance with the long-range master plan of that area. However, things have changed over the years. So, in fairness, I think that the developer has done a good job of trying to meet the requirements, with some exceptions, but that was noted, and the Planning and Zoning Commission made their recommendations on their conditions of their plat and site review. So, I think it's prudent that we ask traffic engineer, I don't know, Mr. Weaver, if you can relay that down, or to the administration, to just confirm with the state if it still meets the requirement of right in, right out, and note that the community council has a resolution, a suggestion it should be right in only because of public safety concerns of traffic.
Thank you, sir. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
And that carries unanimously, which brings us to item 13B, AO 2014-92, an ordinance of Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Title 21, Land Use Planning for fences under Section 21-070.080 of the new Title 21 Code, and for fences under Section 21.45.110 of the old Title 21 Code, to prohibit metal palisade-style fences with pales or points. Brought to us by Assemblymember Johnson. This is a continued public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward at this time. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now. Oh, come on down, sir. Don't be shy. Welcome, sir. If you'd introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Art Davidson, and I have something to pass out to you, if I may. I have just recently become aware of this proposed ordinance, and I've talked to Ms. Johnston, who I think introduced it. I live in a South Anchorage neighborhood. I've been having a cow and 3 calves in my yard almost every day the last week or so, and I like the moose, and I'd hate to see them hung up on a spiked fence. However, my concern is that while we have neighborhoods with a lot of vegetation and a lot of moose, there are other commercial, industrial areas that don't have that many moose. I'm the owner of Best Storage, and I have begun to replace, in some places, chain link fence with this spiked metal fence for 2 main reasons. One, it's more secure. Anyone can go to Home Depot or someplace and get some bolt cutters and quickly cut through chain link. It's not impossible to get over a 6-7 foot spiked metal fence, but it's more difficult. The other reason is aesthetics. It makes the facility more attractive, and it's more attractive for the neighborhood. So what I would propose, that instead of sort of blanketing the entire city with an ordinance that is well intended to protect moose in areas where there's lots of them, look at areas where there aren't so many. Frankly, in the last 30 years, I can only recall 2 or 3 occasions where I've seen a moose near our Midtown location. Boniface, where near Boniface and 4th, we've never seen a moose over there. And to think that a moose is going to be drawn to jump over a fence to chew on a storage unit, I mean, it's just very, very unlikely. So while I support the idea of, I think we may have a few too many moose some parts of Anchorage, but I enjoy them. And while I support doing something to keep them from, an agonizing, unsightly death, I really urge you to try to look at some commercial, industrial areas, perhaps just self-storage itself, where there really isn't a problem. And I feel it'd be unfair to me. I've spent a lot of extra money to make it more secure for my customers, more attractive for my facility and the neighborhood. And why should I have to take that down or cut off the tops, put little balls on tops, as I've heard it said? That would really compromise both security and aesthetics. So I'd just like to ask you to consider my comments. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yeah, there are, Mr. Davidson, so thank you for your thoughtful comments. Let's start with Mr. Honeman.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. First of all, I appreciate your efforts at the old D&J's Alaska Rentals. rented equipment from there for many years, but it's a good improvement aesthetically. It looks very, very well done, and I appreciate
Well, thank you.
Secondly, what height is this fence here?
It's about 7.5 feet.
7.5 foot. Okay, so it would fall within the 9 foot, underneath the 9 foot required. Okay.
I'm not sure about this, if I can interject. I didn't include it in my letter, but I understand that the moose that Fish and Game has said have been caught in these fences go up to 7 feet. And I don't know if there's a magic number, but 7 feet gets pretty high, and unless there is a lot of snow, which there wouldn't be in these kinds of locations, and a lot of forage, which there isn't, I doubt they'd go over that. But anyway, please go ahead.
Well, would if this ordinance were to read less than 7 feet, would that be more appropriate to address if what you're saying is?
Yes, I think so. And I think, in my experience, I don't have a lot of experience with moose jumping fence, but just being in Alaska I think that would be good to the moose, and it would provide an opportunity for people to use this kind of fence.
Okay, thank you.
I do understand there's an ungulate equestrian event scheduled for Rodney this next year. Ms. Johnston, did you have a question?
Well, we have had a discussion. You know, we're both climbers, and do you think? I mean, the points look like you can't get over them, but you could get over a pointed one. I mean, does it necessarily need to be pointed? I mean, we've talked about this square versus.
You know, as I look at security, and with the storage business, I think about it every year for many years now. Nothing is foolproof. So you try to build levels of security, and visual restraints are part of what you do. Sometimes you put up signs that say, you know, Guardian Security or some security company is going to come by or so forth. I think the spikes are a deterrent because nobody wants to get caught on one. If it's up 6, 7 feet high, I mean, you've got to first of all reach up and then somehow shinny up these things. And, you know, you could get spiked in a tender place if you're trying to go over that fence. So I think the spikes are a deterrent.
Okay, well, and in my current ordinance, I think we talked about this, it's any new fence, but we did have a resolution coming from Planning and Zoning, and they've asked to have all fences change within 5 years, all current fences. So that will be part of our discussion. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Someday I'll tell you my story of meeting with the Department of Homeland Security on security issues. But that's all. I don't see any further questions, so thank you for coming down this evening.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Potter, you want to speak to us tonight?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, while this may not be what you'd think I would come and testify on,
you're right.
Mr. Davidson is a longtime friend and called and asked me, you know, what do you think, Tim? And then when it was postponed, I had a chance to actually go through it, read it, because it was something that I had not been following very closely. But it does seem to me that there's been some almost design parameters laid out by Fish and Game at 4 to 7 feet is what there is noteworthy moose damage. And I really think that the Assembly needs to look at this and say, for all intents and purposes, if you pass it the way it is tonight, you're going to outlaw this type of fence. And if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But recognize that you're doing that. Because in a lot of places, a 9-foot fence is not even permitted. It's topped out at 8 feet, so why have a 9-foot if you can't have a 9-foot fence anyway? The other thing is that this is broad-based, the entire city, every type of use. And in residential areas, at the last hearing, there was a couple that came and talked about their interest protecting and the security of their home and their kids and everything else. And while I get that, we do have a different type of development in an industrial and a heavy industrial type of atmosphere where, in fact, there's some uses like self-storage that basically don't require and don't want you to have the landscaping on the inside of the development. You're required to have the landscaping on the outside of the fence so that it actually provides some buffer to the neighbors. So it seems like we're making a holistic shelving of this opportunity when it may be an appropriate fence type at a reasonable height of 7 feet, so you don't run that risk, for certain types of uses. in the industrial or commercial districts where we don't have a typical moose problem. And, you know, I was not joking, but talking with Art that, you know, except for a grizzly bear chasing a moose at 4th Avenue and Boniface, I don't see a circumstance why a moose would go over that fence to get into a storage yard to gnaw on metal. You know, moose may be stupid, but they're not that stupid. Now, they will go over 5 and 6 foot fences in residential districts to get from ornamental tree to birch tree to everything else. Happens in my yard every year. They clip my hedges, they eat my trees, they do everything, and that's fine. And I don't try and fence them out. But there are conditions and land uses in this town that it may be an appropriate, secure fencing type to use. And that's all I just ask you to consider, that the baby with the bathwater, or are we going to do this on an intelligent basis? Your choice.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. I see no questions.
Okay.
Is there anybody else? Tomas, welcome back. You're here
Lucky
for this
break.
too?
Yes, I wasn't planning to testify, but I will. First name is Tamas, last name is Deak. I thought this is a slam dunk ordinance which will go through. Thank you, Ms. Johnston, to move this forward. I'm the chair of the Watershed and Natural Resources Commission. We had done a resolution. It's in your packet. We have worked with science. Science comes from State Department of Natural Resources. It was based upon not feelings of love for the dumb moose. It was based upon the data which has been now numerous times part of the state's, I guess, efforts in town, which is removing moose which has stuck on these fences or got impaled on them. They are not the most fun to watch videos or images to see, and there's absolutely no reason why this ordinance would diminish anybody's ability to fence a property. The issue is about the spiked fence. There were several landowners already, including actually the base, J. Bear, to remove these spikes from the top of the fences and make them more passable by moose. The height restrictions have to do with the range which moose will go through, and actually calves would have been the ones which you would find hung up on small picket fences, which are generally 3 feet at most, and adult moose will get hung up on the taller ones. Since our ordinances deal with fences up to 8 feet, the request is not about really height, it's about the type of fence, which has to do with having the spikes, and these are metal spikes which don't give, so the moose gets stuck or they get impaled. And the request from the state wildlife officers and the scientists were to preserve the resource in a way which is actually a fairly easy thing to do. Allow all fences by anybody, except don't put the spikes on top. Now, I would strongly encourage you to approve this. It seemed like we spent a lot of time on working through the details of how this could happen. You have other recommendations from the planning department, and then you obviously have your investigations into the matter. And I guess I just thank Ms. Johnston again for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diak. There's a few questions for you, so we'll start with Mrs. Johnston.
So what do you think as far as the height? Because it has been basically the 4 to 7 feet. What if we amended this and had anything under 7 feet?
Oh, the issue with the height is, and you're going to have to forgive me, I'm not the wildlife biologist. I just listen to them. So what the data shows is that based on the age of moose, any kind of fence which have the ability to even the legs get caught will kill a moose. And it doesn't kill them because they get impaled. It kills them because they hung up vertically, and how the moose is built, that doesn't work for them. After a few hours, they're gonna die. So if the wildlife officers can't remove them from the fences, which is actually a fairly dangerous exercise, then they will perish. So the height is really difficult one to pin at a certain number. The issue is really the type of fence, and these fences are the ones where you have the metal spikes going through the top rail, and the request, and kind of we thought of design ideas, and one of the ideas is that you don't have to replace the fence, you just have to remove the spikes, and you can do it with a reciprocating saw.
What about the idea of industrial areas where, I mean, there's not as much landscaping?
Well, if we would have a very good map of tracking moose wildlife corridors, that would be probably a bit more predictable of where these moose travel. Unfortunately, we don't. Therefore, the ordinance was intended to cover the Anchorage Bowl. It's in our comprehensive plan that we try to coexist with wildlife. Therefore, it seemed like a good idea to eliminate the problem altogether in all areas. Now, in industrial areas, there are certainly less reason for the moose to go to feed. There is a lot of reason for them perhaps to travel, and we don't have the data of where that occurs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir, for bringing up the science of this. I've been trying to nail down the impact of this. I've heard varying degrees of how many moose in the city of Anchorage have been killed on these fences, and I've heard everything from 3 in the last 10 years to 3 to 4 every year. Did your study group have any definitive answer on that?
Well, our definitive answer comes from basically Jesse Coltrane was the one who presented to us, who is DNR's wildlife officer at this time. On the commission, to our benefit, we also have Rick Sinnott, who used to do the same job before her. They brought the data that it's about 3 or 4 times at least every year there is going to be an incident. Not all of them will end up being a fatal incident, but at one location there was 2 instances where a moose was impaled, and they had to remove that moose from the same exact fence. Now, that obviously irks them terribly, but at the same time shows that this is not a entirely accidental occurrence. It has to do with the design of these fences, and they brought forward the issue as one which is out there. It has some numbers. You can consider whether they are low or high. Any number like that seemed like, after watching the video, it's too high.
Thank you, sir. I see no further questions.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to us on this matter? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? Ms. Johnston?
Move to approve the B2.
BS version?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Okay.
Moved and seconded. Ms. Johnston, do you wish to speak to this one?
Well, I understand the reticence, and I have concerns too. We all know that moose, the best way to call moose in this town is with a car, and we certainly wouldn't outlaw a car. And I did bring this forward because I was asked by a number of constituents. I originally had said, well, just going forward, we wouldn't allow them. And then the Planning and Zoning Commission brought, as they say, the S version, giving 5 years to fix the problems. I'd be happy if anybody wanted to amend. In fact, I will, just to try this. On line 28, the metal palisade style fencing under 9 feet, I would like to have 7 feet in height as opposed to 9 feet.
Second. I'll second that.
I'm sorry. Is that on line 21?
Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong.
Page 3, line 21?
Right.
So the motion, if you please press your button, Ms. Johnston. Mr. Honeman was the second, I believe. Yep. The motion is on line 21 of page 3, to delete 9 and replace that with 7. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Please proceed to vote on that motion. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
So by a vote of 10 yeas and 1 nay, that motion carries. Ms. Johnson, do you wish to continue?
No, I just urged 6 people to vote for it.
Any particular 6? Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I could call what I'm about to say a point of order, but whatever it is, I think that we all need to be reminded that we established a citizens task force on the public hearing process, and in the code 230050, it says when there's a substitute ordinance that the sponsor needs to provide a written summary of the significant changes, and we don't have that here. And I think that not having that document is, number one, not following the code, and number two, it's disenfranchising our citizens, Mr. Chairman, and I just needed to bring that to the attention of this body and also the administration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Honeman.
I withdraw it. Thank you. I was going to make the motion, but
Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I absolutely respect what Ms. Gray Jackson has said. I think public process is an important one, but since we're here tonight, I just am in general going to vote no on this ordinance. Probably no surprise to anyone. I think I have neighbors that have these palisade fences. They're very nice looking. They keep their dog in every time I walk by. Their kids are out playing, but nobody's going to scale the fence. I mean, they're kind of intimidating to look at, but the nice thing is they have a beautiful inlet view so I can see right through the fence. I like these fences. And I think when we get to the point where we're starting to tell people that not only can you not have this type of fence, but we're going to force you as a government to incur costs to change your fence, I can't support it in any fashion. So I appreciate where you're coming from and bringing it forward on behalf of some of your constituents. But this is an item that I personally am going to vote no all the way through on. But with that said, in light of what Ms. Gray Jackson said, Mr. Chairman, I move to postpone this to our October 5th. Is that our next meeting?
I believe our next meeting is on October 21.
Oh, sorry. We're past the 5th already, aren't we? I was thinking November. I'm sorry. So we'll say October 21st, and we'll let the sponsor, if they choose to, write a summary on the S version. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Would you please press your button, Ms. Domboski? And Ms. Gray Jackson, are you the second on that?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thanks. Moved and seconded. Ms.
Can I speak to this?
You may, and by the way, I was just looking, you may want to make a conforming amendment on page 5.
I was just going to say, I moved the S version. It came from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it says in the resolution what they did, and this was in last night's meeting. So I'm not sure if that would be enough to cover Ms. Gray Jackson's concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Yeah, just for everyone's attention, we had laid on the table item tonight 14F1, which was a summary of the Planning and Zoning Commission's deliberations and recommendations from last night. Ms. Johnson, as I mentioned, if you look at page 5 on line 16, I think you may want to make a conforming amendment with your previous one. And while you think about that, Ms. Domboski.
Regardless of what Planning and Zoning has summarized here, I don't know. I still think it's a fine thing to let the public have 2 weeks to read this, especially since it was just passed last night. I don't think the public has had time to adequately digest the S version. Regardless of either version, I'm going to vote no, so I'll just put that on the record. But I think it's fair that the public has a chance to digest what happened just 24 hours ago.
So the motion is to postpone for 2 weeks. Ms. Gray Jackson, you wish to speak to that or the next item?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I just want to say that I agree with Ms. Domboski wholeheartedly because, first off, ordinances are submitted by assembly members or the mayor at the request of the chair, not the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. The motion is to postpone to the meeting of October 21. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee?
No.
So by a vote of 8 yeas and 3 nays, that motion carries. We'll take this one up in 2 weeks. Ms. Johnson, I'm sure you noted the amendment suggestion, right? That brings us to item 14A, AO 2014-124, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly authorizing the municipal clerk to contract with the League of Women Voters to prepare a neutral summary for the municipal proposition to be determined by the November 4, 2014 election, finding no conflict with municipal interests, provisions to the contrary in AMC Chapter 115 notwithstanding, and providing for retroactive application, brought to us by Vice Chair Trainee, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 583-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move an amendment before we approve this document, and it's on page 2, line 14. At the end, I'd like to change contact to read contract.
Second.
That is definitely the intent of the clerk, to have a contract with the League of Women Voters. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I second that.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. If you kindly press your button. Mr. Honeman. I'm sure nobody has any questions, so we'll just vote. Please, Mr. Trainee. Mr. Trainee.
Yes on the amendment.
Thank you, sir. And that carries unanimously. That brings us back to the original item. Is there just further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And that carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14B, AO 2014-125. An ordinance approving a letter of agreement between the Municipality of Anchorage and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 1547, the IBEW, to clarify provisions in the recently negotiated collective bargaining agreement, CBA, provide for an effective date retroactive to the same date as the CBA, which is August 5th of 2014, and reduce the 30-day period for public review and comment. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have, I guess, a question for the administration or whoever is here that can answer it. My understanding is that the purpose of these changes that we're approving was to clarify language from the recent negotiations that could have caused operational concerns. I have a question with respect to the changes on the work schedules section. It's section 4.31. It's on page 572 of our materials. And the question is the original language that we approved and at the last meeting stated that work schedules for the employees shall be determined by the municipality within the parameters set forth in other provisions of this agreement, and that was the end of this section. The clarification that they're asking us to incorporate now actually is the opposite of what was there previously. It now says, with mutual agreement between the municipality and the union, changes to the schedules defined in the work rules can be modified based on operational necessity. So previously, it looked like the municipality had the management right to set the schedules, and with this new language, it's saying it has to be agreed on by the union. So my question is, after that long wind-up, how, first of all, operationally, process-wise, how did this not get incorporated originally, since it completely changes the language? And I'll ask the second question at the same time. The original language that we approved was in the previous agreement. It wasn't new language that needed clarification. So if somebody could answer those questions for me.
I see someone eagerly anticipating an opportunity to speak to you, Mr. Evans. Welcome.
Yes, I'm Teresa Hillhouse. I'm Labor Relations Director for Employee Relations. And I did get notice of your question. The amendment that was made to the original language was done because during the negotiations, it took almost a year to get this contract through. We had certain deadlines set, certain schedules starting in that contract. There was concern if some of those schedules were going to start on time, and so this language was offered in there to allow for mutual agreement of the two parties if we're going to start a schedule later. What the original language refers to is that the municipality shall set the schedules as put forth in the agreement. We wanted to give that flexibility for operations, so if we had a crunch on some of those schedules, we could have some flexibility. Our concern was the shall language. And I know you asked me a second question. I'm sorry, I forgot what that one was.
Thank you, Mr. House. I'll have a follow-up question. Maybe it'll clarify that. Is what you're saying that the original language that said that the work schedules for the employees shall be determined by the municipality was not sufficient?
The concern came up particularly, we had one schedule starting with some new construction. We had that stated in the agreement that would start by a certain date, and we were concerned if we could make that date. So we worked with the union to allow us to have some flexibility so we could agree to start some of that schedules put forth in the work rules a little later than set forth in the agreement.
Anything else, Mr. Evans?
While I'm here, just another quick clarification on a different point in the agreement. There's some language that was changed on page 573 of our language. It's section 9.5P, and it occurs in other places, but it changed the word premium to pay enhancement. Can you tell me what that's all about?
Some of that was a terminology. We did define the term pay enhancement in our personnel rules. It deals with the formula, how you calculate a personnel enhancement. The premium was sort of the buzzword that you saw in a lot of the collective bargaining agreements before. We've been switching to more of a pay enhancement and specialty pay. So you're starting to see those terms show up in the agreements. Sometimes we didn't catch them all.
Is there a difference substantively between a pay enhancement and a premium?
I would say a premium can cover more than just a pay enhancement. It could also be a specialty. It's something in addition to. So pay enhancement is a much more defined term, and it deals with the formula, how to calculate it.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Starr.
Not for you, but for Mr. Wheeler in particular.
Thank you, Ms. Hillhouse.
Thank you. The letter of agreement restrictions on what we can use a letter of agreement for, are we pushing our luck here on the definition of an LOA and the terms of clarification by adding new terms such as the one identified? And I see other areas where we've got a 5% additional language now for expanding the terms and conditions. Are we taking a letter of agreement past what it's authorized to be able to do?
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, the reason for the definitions in Title III for letters of agreement, side agreements, administrative letters, and so forth was to try to identify what needed to come to the Assembly for approval. So it's not really meant to say what could be in those letters, but just whether or not those letters needed your review. So in this case, it's come before you just as a main contract would come to you for review. So there's no problem with a letter of agreement dealing with a major issue or adding new definitions or new language or new terms. In that regard, as long as it goes through the same public process for review and ratification, you can address those issues in a letter of agreement.
Yeah, I guess I thought my understanding was that there was some language that was written on, and I don't have it in front of me. That's why I asked the question relating to the financial aspects of the terms and conditions changes in an LOA, but maybe I'm just remembering something that was different, but I thought we weren't allowed to use an LOA for material and financial changes. But if you're saying otherwise, that's certainly news to me. I thought we had a financial restriction.
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, I'll look for that, but I don't recall that.
Well, the reason is because there's no financial summary.
You bumped your mic off.
If we don't have a summary of economic effects associated with that, I haven't seen one stating that the cost of the changes will be X. I would like to adhere to that policy as well.
Ms. Hillhouse, can you inform on this particular topic?
Yes, if I could, through the chair. We did take a cost estimate of what these changes were done or could have occurred, what that would mean to the contract. It was around $4,000. They mainly dealt with the classifications. Those were the ones we could identify a specific amount. Many of these things were just ongoing. We assumed they were already in the contract, so they did not change it from the beginning. It just terminology provisions got left out. But it came out to about $4,000. We went to internal audit. They're the ones that review our cost estimate. They found that it was insubstantial. So you'll see the note in your ordinance that says that this was reviewed by internal audit, and they have determined a C was not necessary because it was not substantial.
Thank you, Ms. Hillhouse. Mr. Starr, does that satisfy your question for now?
Yeah, as long as Mr. Wheeler's still of the mind that an LOA can be used for this. I thought we had financial limitations on it. I thought it was definitional only.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. Are you ready, Mr. Wheeler?
Through the chair, Mr. Starr, the definition contains a phrase that says if the letter has any financial consequences, then it's one that needs to come to the assembly. That may be what you're thinking of.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for indulging me for a second round. This is more in the lines of a comment. With respect to the work schedule change, we have a little dispute going on, referred to as AO37,
Never heard of
that this body may be familiar with. That's now going to the people for a vote, and it's caused a lot of angst and anxiety everywhere. We made a sort of what I would call a valiant effort to try to find common ground on that issue earlier this year with the committee, and the committee came very close to reaching an agreement. And the issue that ultimately ended up derailing everything was the issue of being able to schedule workers and schedule equipment. That was an issue that management took the position that we had to have that control, and the unions didn't want to give that up where it existed in their contracts already. And we got to that place because previous administrations had, for whatever reasons, over time, given up those management rights or bargained them away in previous contracts. And despite the fact that we're fighting this fight on AO37, or at least some folks are, in this agreement here, the work schedules, despite the intention of Ms. Hillhouse and the others who negotiated this to address a very particular issue, what this language does is give away those rights again. You've given away the rights to schedule the workers by this language, and it really is just absolutely frustrating to anybody who's fighting to try to get those rights back. And because of that, I can't approve this. But I just wanted that to be said.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnston. And by the way, Mr. Evans, I still appreciate your hard work on that subject.
Mr. Evans took some of my thoughts, but I'd like to ask Ms. Holthouse to come back up, please. Sorry.
It was Hillhouse.
Huh?
Hillhouse.
Anyways, you said that there were a couple of scheduled changes. Why didn't we just list the changes, the specific needed areas? Why was it broad brushed like this?
There was the specific concern about the new construction project and the timing of that. That was one item. But there was also some flexibility that they wanted to put in some of the schedules within the contract. And I appreciate Mr. Evans' our discussion regarding the contract. We do try to keep with management shall set the schedules. But there are times we want some flexibility due to operational needs. And so we have built in many of our contracts where we say almost this exact language: the municipality shall set the schedule for employers and work, we often have provisions in there that allow, when we set out our schedules, some flexibility. So due to management needs or due to an employee's particular needs, we can deviate from that schedule. And so one of the concerns with this particular provision was because of the shall language, it was very strong there, that we allow for this additional provisions that the parties can change something that is specifically in the current contract and agree to make a scheduling change. So again, for better flexibility and the new construction concern.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you, Ms. Hillhouse. Mr. Honeman?
Briefly, I just, having been set through the body and having set through AO37 issues and having talked with several members of the representative groups, one of the concerns of Sticky Wicket in this particular matter is collective bargaining in good faith over wages, hours, and working conditions. And those are the three things that, if you will, are the base concerns for labor negotiations. And so while I respect your position, particularly as a labor attorney, I have to state that I think that it covers both ways, that the municipality and the management has the right to set a schedule, but when it comes to changing a schedule, that it be a bit permissive, that allows that it can be changed and modified with consent or agreement of. So it doesn't mean that it will, and it doesn't mean that it has to or shall, but the municipality and the labor representative, in this case IBEW, can agree to that, and I think that's very flexible. I'm supportive.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify, and with all due respect to my friend, Mr. Evans, I think we're ignoring what the first sentence says in this sentence. It says, work schedules for the employees shall be determined by the municipality. If the union comes to us and says, we'd like to change the schedule, we have to agree to that. It has to be mutually consented upon. So if we don't agree, we're still in control of the work schedule. But there may be a time when it's to the benefit of the municipality and to management to adjust that schedule. But the language before the underlined part says we shall set the schedule, and we have to mutually agree to change it. So I don't think it destroys our management rights at all. I think if you read it in its totality, we still retain, as well we should, the management right on schedules. Thank you.
You had to pick the scab, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Evans, last time.
Fair enough. With all due respect, I think that the original language allowed the municipality, and rightfully so, to set the schedules, which would also mean changing the schedules. And I think all that the added language does is that once you have schedules in place, you can't change them unless you get the agreement of the union. So I don't think it enhanced anything other than limiting the rights management already had. But I appreciate that others may view that differently.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Traney.
Yes.
So by a vote of 8 yeas and 3 nays, that motion carries. That brings us to item 14C, AO 2014-122, an ordinance authorizing a lease renewal on a portion of Tract B, Abbott Road subdivision between Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility and the Alaska Wireless Network, LLC, formerly ACS Wireless Incorporated and GCI. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum AM 576-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward at this time. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing none, please proceed to vote. Mr. Traney.
Yes.
And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14D, AR 2014-252, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving alcoholic beverages conditional use for retail sales of alcohol associated with brewery license 5031 in the I-1 Light Industrial District for Anchorage Brewing Company, LLC, doing business as the Anchorage Brewing Company at 148 West 91st Avenue within King Subdivision Number 2, Block 1, Lot 16, generally located south of West 91st Avenue and west of King Street in Anchorage. The Taku Campbell and Bayshore Clack Community Councils. It's case 2014-142, brought to us by the Community Development Department. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 560-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
It's been moved in second. Is there discussion? Mr. Honeman.
Just a comment, I believe these folks have been fairly responsible in a previous location or a renewal on this, and they've been fairly responsive, so urge approval.
We downtown denizens are sorry to see them go. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14E, AR 2014-269, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving an alcoholic beverages conditional use for a beverage dispensary use and license number 2496 in the B3 General Business District for Texas Roadhouse Holdings, doing business as Texas Roadhouse at 9001 Old Seward Highway within Madigan Place Subdivision Tract A1, Fragment Lot K-4B, Plat 94-160, generally located east of the Old Seward Highway, south of Diamond Boulevard, west of Seward Highway, and north of Abbott Road in Anchorage, the Campbell Community Council area. That's case 2014-143, brought to us by the Community Development Department, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 588-2014. This is yet another public hearing. If you wish to not speak to us on this matter, you can sit down. If you want to speak to us, come on down. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello.
So nice of you to break our rhythm.
Good evening, Chair of the Assembly. My name is Nicole Kaur. I'm an attorney with Holland & Knight. I'm here representing Texas Roadhouse, basically to answer any questions you may have. I do know that the liquor license transfer was also on your agenda. I think it was item 93B, and I think that's been approved. And this is for the conditional use permit.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I see no questions. You can relax, and we'll see if we need to get you back up here.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else wants to speak to us on this matter? Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing no one, please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Ms. Johnston she's a yes by proxy, and that carries unanimously. Easiest fee you ever earned, ma'am. That brings us to item 14F. AO 2014-126, an ordinance extending the time period for the voluntary use of the old Code Title 21 land use planning until December 31st, 2015. Brought to us by Assembly Members Johnston and Demboski. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on the matter, please come forward. That was a lot easier than the last one. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's the move and second. Is there discussion? Mr. Mayor? Oh, you want to speak to this one? No? All right. Mr. Honeman. Mr. Honeman.
I'm concerned about not having a design criteria manual and some other builder's notes for the new Title 21, but I'm also concerned that keep punting it down the road is not necessarily in our best interest for our community. I think this has been vetted fairly well. Title 21, we've got a comprehensive plan that was set in the early 90s is when the discussion came about, and we're at nearly 2015, and probably ought to be looking at planning long-term for the future, and we're not even adopted to Title 21 from that comprehensive plan. So I'm concerned and disturbed that we're not, we've had an extended year, this whole year, and why we're not there, and I guess I'm curious as to why we're not with a design criteria manual. Mr. Weaver, is there any answer to that, or someone that can answer why we don't have a design criteria manual or builder's notes for Title 21? And a user guide?
How's that for a softball, Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Honan. Basically, it's not the DCM. The DCM's housed in the Public Works Department, and it's basically the user's guide. And some of those, the user's guide was meant to be illustrative to try to show how to implement some of the new provisions that are in the code for to make it easier to use. And quite frankly, we have not had the opportunity to do that because of the workload.
Yeah. If we were to postpone this instead of the full year for 4 months, would that be an opportunity to get that completed so we can move on? I mean, I really think we need to be able to move on with new Title 21.
The user's guide needs to be developed. It's not imperative to the implementation of the code.
I understand. How many people have already, do you know how many builders have already used the new code?
Generally, it looks like about 10% of the applications are under the new code.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Ms. Johnston.
Well, I didn't come to this lightly. And as you know, I was starting to see what we could do this year with the two codes running simultaneously, and to see if we could have a relatively smooth transition, knowing that we had to make some changes. And as you know, any ordinance is not perfect. And Title 21 is that thick, and there's a lot of imperfections in it. A lot of things have not been finished. To your point, Title 21, the new code is going. It's in place. So it's not that it's not going. It's just they're running simultaneously. And we do have a lot more building that is going on now than we had at the beginning of the year. And we have some developments that are actually, at their own expense, really going to spend a lot of time researching the two Title 21s and what works best and what doesn't. And the Title 21 committee is actually going to be using those resources to, I feel that it's going to be quite valuable to us. So I didn't do this just because I didn't like the new Title 21. I've got a lot of time vested in that new one, and I'd like to see it go. But I want to know what policies are really working, and I don't want to rush into corrections and find out that actually maybe those policies were the ones we wanted. So I think we need to be measured in our approach on how we look at Title 21 and how we get it to be the community document that we want, and rushing it into play without a user guide and without the Public Works Design Criteria Manual. I'm not ready to do it. I think we need to do this in a very orderly and progressive manner.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have concerns too, similar along Mr. Honeman's, in terms of we're about ready to get ready to start a new plan. We're almost at 2020, and it would be nice if the implementation tools were in place. It certainly has to take a toll on the workforce when they have to deal with two codes and process plans with both of them. Just complaining doesn't make it so, but we should have something in place. I suspect that the zoning maps are not updated for the new for the 2020 plan. I suspect there's other things that need to be done as well in order to have a fully functioning plan and ordinances and processes to do the work. We just keep kicking it down the road. That doesn't do us any good. And so I think let's give the staff a little bit of help and have them have only one document to do. If we've got changes to make in the Title 21, they'll come out during that process. And so I'm in favor of not kicking it down the road.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first off, I'd like to thank Ms. Demboski and Ms. Johnson for bringing this forward. And when I first saw it, I looked and I go, well, it makes sense, that we wait another year because there are things that need to be worked out. But then when I saw a memo from staff, and in addition to it, the 6-page memo right in front of us right now that staff sent to Planning and Zoning Commission, it's troubling to me to extend this for another year. It's just really, really troubling. So I guess I'd like to ask Mr. Weaver a question, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Weaver? Shouldn't have walked so far away, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Ms.
First,
Jackson.
Mr. Weaver, thank you, your staff, for the work that you've done on Title 21. Are you ready to move forward with the new code? I know I have a book, but...
You have our commentary from the department there, and the commission discussed this at length last night. There are private sector people that have concerns with the implementation of the code the first year, and I don't know if you have all those letters. There's probably 4 or 5 or maybe 6 letters that some of the architect engineering community said that they needed more time to make sure that it's going to work for them, because there have been some glitches. We had a multifamily charrette with the design community, and there are glitches in the multifamily section that need to be repaired and improved. And people are saying that perhaps there are other areas of the code that need the same thing, and that's why the commission, on a 6-to-1 vote last night, recommended to extend it out for another year. It's challenging to work with two codes, both the community and the staff. At some point in time, we need to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Mr. Chairman, if I could make one more comment?
Please. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Don't run too far away.
Well, I don't need to ask any more questions. I don't need to, but maybe somebody else does. But anyway, the 6-page memo, number 7 stands out to me the most because it says respect for the process. And we've been dealing with this for 12 years. I thought it was only 10, but this says 12 years, and that's a really, really long time. And we need to move forward. We have the opportunity to make changes. As a matter of fact, Mr. Train and I have a change that we're going to bring forward, but I really want to see the new code in place on December 31st, 2014, as planned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, to me, this is common sense. You know, the department is readily admitting they're not really ready. They don't have their user manual. The DCM is not ready. So what we're doing as a legislative body is we're asking an entire industry, which is substantial in our community, not only to the money that comes in, but it's a substantial part of our economy. So we're asking them to, okay, let's go ahead in the blind, in the dark, we're going to go ahead and make you use this, and we're not exactly sure how it's going to work yet. That's not good. That's not good government. It's not good management. It's not good leadership. So nobody is saying let's block Title 21. Nobody's saying that at all. I mean, Ms. Johnston has been very active in that we want to proactively start figuring out what isn't working, and we want to make sure that we have everything lined out. All we're asking is that we give the industry, the people that are actually, you know, keeping our economy going, we give them a clear understanding of how we're going to implement these new regulations, because they're not developed yet. So that's all we're asking. Nobody's saying we want to block it. Nobody's saying we want to stop it. But when I hear there are glitches, that's a big red flag for me. When I hear, you know, we should have something in place and we don't, that's the director that's telling you that. To me, it's baffling that people would just say nope, we're not going to know exactly how this is going to work. We're just going to vote for it anyway. I'm not willing to risk that segment of the economy for that. I want a little bit better of a plan. And all I'm saying is let's just give it a little bit more time. And I can tell you, I've been approached by members of the engineering and architecture portion of it, and they are fearful because they don't know what this is going to do, because they can't get clear answers from staff of certain parts of this code. So I just say, everybody just take a breath and realize this is not anybody trying to derail Title 21 at all. It's just saying, let's get our ducks in a row, so when we do make this substantial change and we go all into the new Title 21, the industry and the people that are actually building Anchorage can successfully do it. I don't want to see a big hiccup. And unfortunately, I'm fearful that's where we're going if we force this down their throat without being ready to do it.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski. Mr. Starr.
Well, I think several elements are in play that would help. For one, electronic plan review will significantly close down the window of opportunity for miscommunication. It'll also speed up the exchange of data in complicated design challenges that are going to be new to the Title 21 design group. I also think that outside plan review needs to be revisited again. We saw an outside code review and outside plan review for the latest multifamily dwelling that occurred last meeting. It's a dandy-looking facility, and if that's the kind of input we're going to get with outside plan review and outside code review, then we need a mechanism for that. And then thirdly, I think we need a mechanism on this body that we need to work hard through the Title 21 Committee on how to facilitate timely rewrites of the code itself. We burdened ourselves with some of them. The corrective measures for even in Chugach Eagle River Chapter 10, having to send it to the advisory board, could take many, many months to get feedback for something hopefully simply changed. So I'm not certain how to do it. Mr. Weaver's put several changes to the new code and the old code in the system here the last couple meetings. They're obviously good at it, but we need to get good at it as well, and that's a lot of new member input. So those three items, I'm going to support the delay. We're finally, I'll speak only, we're coming into a new building cycle. What they design and draw now under this time frame is going to be built next summer. We're in the thick of it. So even though it appears that it would all kick off on December, I think you're finding that the buildings that we're going to see under construction and for approval are in the queue already, financing as well. So I'm happy to give the industry some time to partake, and hopefully we do it correct. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Mrs. Johnston.
Sorry for taking a second bite, but to answer some of Ms. Gray Jackson's concern, Mr. Weaver brought up the charrette, and I actually attended the morning. I couldn't do the afternoon because we had assembly meetings, but I really appreciated Erica putting that together, and the industry was very engaged in that. But because of that, we do not have the amendments that are going to be coming out of it. And I think those should be done well, and it takes time. You'll notice that on our introductions tonight, we had two amendments to Title 21. One is one that I actually was trying to get last spring. It's an easy technical one to Chapter 9, and it's slowing down a building down at Alyeska. And it's just getting to us now. The other is one that's coming from the industry, and it's on the floor area ratio, and it's incentives for that. And this is all part of Title 21. And I think we really want to get the policy correct. I think, I'm looking here, and no one has sat on that committee as long as I have. And when you talk about due process, and when you talk about going through the due process for 7 years, I want to see this done with due process and done well, and it will take another year. The other thing we don't have is our new land management map, and that's also integral in this whole Title 21 code. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. There's a reason if at least some of us haven't served on that committee. Mr. Sullivan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, it is the administration's position that we do support the one-year extension, and for a number of reasons. As you're aware, I'm out and about in the community an awful lot, speaking to groups and attending various seminars, functions of all kinds, and I've heard many, many times from the building community that they would just like a little more leeway, a little more time. You've got people, and Mr. Weaver mentioned the fact that particularly in the multifamily housing area, an area where we have a critical need in this community, there's still work to be done on Title 21. And we've got people right now ready to make business investments in the millions of dollars, and they are really stymied by what direction they're going to have to take going forward because, quite frankly, implementation of the new version at this stage makes some of those projects non-economic, and we just cannot afford that in this community. So I ask the body's indulgence to help the administration make sure that we do get it right. I served on the Assembly for 9 years, and during my time as mayor, we brought it to this point, which is really a culmination of an awful lot of work, but we do need additional time. We want to get it right because we don't want people not making investments or making investments that aren't profitable for them and for the community. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everything here is all still new and exciting to me. I've been on the...
We'll break you of that, sir.
I've been on the Title 21 committee for about 6 minutes now. But, I mean, at times, at the points where I've been frustrated in my several months here, it's usually been because I get the sense sometimes that because of the pace of things and the volume of stuff, that we push through things that we really haven't thought sufficiently about or worked on hard enough just because we got to move so much stuff. So I have been gratified to see how the Title 21 process is working. I think actually the idea of having the duality of both ordinances existing at the same time is really a benefit. I think if we look at it and use that over the next year to see where those frictions are and what works better than others, I think we'll get a better product in the end than if we just push through Title 21 now and try to fix it as we go along. And I'm concerned we have a development problem in this town in a number of areas, and I would be hesitant to do anything that I think would exacerbate that at this point. So I think that having the dual approach makes the most sense, and I'm going to support that.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. As the guy who has to read old code and new code every time we take up a Title 21 issue, I'm not sure I appreciate it. But I have a question for Mr. Potter, who I see in the audience here. Mr. Potter, do you have a moment? You've been doing this.
You were awfully fast. Usually I'm quick enough to get down here and make sure you know I wanted to speak, but that gavel came down pretty fast.
I do my best. And you've been doing this for a long time, so a little help, please.
3 minutes? 2 minutes? I'll try and be very quick then. Yes, I did want to speak on this tonight. This is a critical issue. If you've seen the package of letters, mine is one. Yes, we have been dealing with this for 12 years. There are some shortcomings in the process, and I will just let you know that this is such a complex undertaking, and it has been, with inadequate testing through real projects to understand what the real implications are. And in the last year, my company, myself, have been doing quite a few of the reviews, and the staff is right. About 90% of the projects that have gone forward have been to the old code. And part of that is that there's benefits to the new code, there's benefits to the old code, and there's really decisions being made. And we are finding very significant issues dealing with economics, design restrictions, all kinds of things that weren't anticipated and weren't looked at and tested. And I will stand here before you tonight and tell you that it is the government's responsibility and obligation to the community that when you change code and do dramatic, huge changes to the code, that you test them to make sure that the community has something that they can work with confidence. Now, can you draft a perfect code? It's impossible. There are going to be things that need to be changed. But right now, when we head off into the world of making multifamily, and Representative from Widener Apartment Homes is in the audience, we are undertaking a 300-unit project. We're in the initial design and conceptual stages of that, and the real only reason that anybody knows right now why we're going with the new code is the benefits in the parking, because there's a parking reduction based on some real work that was done by the staff. The rest of the design standards that are associated with doing multifamily is really a mystery. Now, there's only been 2 projects really taken through the process that are sizable in any way, shape, or form. One's under construction. None have been completed. We don't know enough. And generally, I'm just telling you, we did not have adequate testing, especially in the multifamily area. The staff may tell you that there was exhaustive testing. There were looks at certain areas, but there wasn't a real analysis done of real projects going through the process to let you know what the potential outcome is. We need another year so that we in the profession and the owner developer with skin in the game can look at the old code, run the project, look at the new code, run the project, and through that we're going to find out an awful lot. And we will be reporting those things to the staff and to the community. What's very important is that as we find glitches and or things that were unforeseen consequences, we need to be able to process those quickly. Not in a year, not in 6 months. It needs to happen. You lose 6 months in this town, you lose a construction season and a year. That's why it's very important, and I'm asking you to vote for the extension of time. Let us have the experiment. Since the community didn't put the money up to do the proper testing, let's let another year go by using both codes, do the testing, and in the private sector, we're obligated to understand what the hell the code says. Old code and the new code. The staff, for whatever reason, according to the memos given to you, have had a tough time getting up to speed on what the new code is. And I'm trying to figure out where the dichotomy is between the private sector and the public sector, that the regulators don't necessarily have to know what it says, but the private sector is obligated to know. And that is a frustration. So I would really ask for your approval of the extension as we go forward. And it's not a delay to put things off forever. This is going forward in an intellectual way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. I think Ms. Gray Jackson has a question for you before you run
Thank you,
off.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Potter, for your testimony. And you just said that the staff, they have a tough time getting up to speed what the new code is. Did you say that?
Yes.
Yeah. Don't you think that maybe one of the reasons is because they're dealing with two and they're short-staffed?
I'll go ahead and say something else that some of you may like, some of you may not like. The administration and the Assembly are also obligated to reasonably fund those sections of the community so that the work can be done. And the Planning Department has taken hit after hit after hit. They are beyond the point of being able to be made more efficient. They are not able to get their work done. They are not able to do the community's work. They're not able to do your work. And if I were the planning director, I would have drawn a line a long time ago and said, Mr. Starr, you want something done? Mr. Peterson, you want something done? Do you want to have everything else stop and we'll do your thing? Or I would have said, no, we're not going to do that till we get this done. You can fire me if you want, but that's where we're at in this town. There is not enough staffing and not enough budget in the planning department right now to get the work done that needs to be done for this community to fully implement what we all said 12, 13 years ago with the comp plan we wanted to have happen. So, you know, I'll make my statements and I'll try and help you where I can, but the responsibility comes back to these two podiums, and that's where it sits. Thank you.
Thank
Can
you,
I follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. I agree with you 200%. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Honeman for Mr. Potter, or?
No, I would appreciate your candor, and you answered most of the questions I had of you, and I saw you sitting there. Mr. Weaver, if briefly...
Before you continue, Mr. Honeman, I think Mr. Steele had a question for Mr. Potter.
Okay,
so
very good.
Before we let him escape, can we do that real quick?
I do, Mr. Potter. Thank you for the statement with regards to staff. I have thought there was a problem for a long time. But my question is, electronic plan review, would that help in terms of freeing up staff perhaps to help the process?
It will help with some efficiency. Right now, we do all of our work digitally, and then we submit hard copies. Those aren't posted online, so the community can't really review anything, so they get upset with the staff and take staff time. They get upset with us because they don't know what it is we're trying to do. If we did have that ability to post the actual electronic applications and materials online so that the public could, if they get the goofy notice that says something's going to happen within 500 feet of you on this location, and it's going to be on this piece of property, but we really can't tell you because we don't have enough room to tell you what it is. You know, it would solve some of that problem, and that's an efficiency that is attainable. But that's not going to be it. We need to understand that when we're in a growth mode and trying to seek out how to do that and implement all these plans and make it work, somebody has to do the work. And, you know, I'd like that a shared thing rather than having it always dumped on the private sector. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. Mr. Honeman from Mr. Weaver?
Brief question, Mr. Weaver, if I could.
I'm sure it'll be the fastest one of the night.
Yes. Mr. Weaver, I'm going to ask and perhaps task, I don't know if through the administration, that Mr. Weaver, I would like to know what it would take to do exactly what Mr. Potter was intimating. What would it take to get the user guide, design criteria manual, the land map upgrade, and adequately do this where that we can be, these new code can be tested so that we can finally get this thing going without having the concerns. I don't know if you have that answer tonight. I would ask that you, and task that perhaps Planning Department through the administration, please pass that to all of my colleagues.
Mr. Flynn, Mr. Owen, we can get that to you in written form, but basically, let me say, the electronic plan review would gain an efficiency of 30% for both the private sector and public sector. So there's no question about it. Private plan review used on the building side and the planning side would gain efficiencies, tremendous efficiencies. We've been pushing for that for quite a long time. The DCM is housed in the Public Works Department, not the Planning Division. So the user's guide is a small portion of all that. The land use plan map is underway, proposed to take to the Planning Commission in January. So the land use plan map is underway. We've retained a previous employee with GIS skills to come back and help find some of the old files that they had worked on to be able to accelerate that. So all those pieces we're working forward as fast as we can to wrap up all those loose ends.
So my question to you then, just a brief follow-up, is if this were extended for 4 months as opposed to the entire year, would that be a reachable goal to be able to get all these things completed?
No.
6 months? Any idea how long it might take?
It depends on what comes out of the land use committee and what's determined that needs to be looked at in addition to the multifamily.
I'm just trying to figure out, get a grasp on if you need funding for people, for programs, what it is. So I'd like to have that.
Thank you, Mr. Honeman.
We're building the budget.
Mr. Steele, third bite at the apple. Make it
I'm
quick.
sorry, but I do have a question for Mr. Weaver.
You're killing him.
Mr. Weaver, I've been told for almost a year now that there's a RFP in the works. What's the status of that RFP?
The RFP is in the works. It's being reviewed by the IT department, and we're hopeful that it will come out of the IT department shortly.
And do you need IT staff to implement as well? So do they have to be freed up in order to, once you get the RFP in, to...
It would be highly desirable to have IT staff to implement it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Mr. Starr from Mr. Weaver or else otherwise?
Sure. Mr. Weaver, your budget's in front of us now, introduced tonight. Are we pretty cognizant where we're at? We did a first quarter budget amendment this year, adding, I think, either one or two additional plan reviewers. Did we get it? Is it
Yes,
right?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Starr. Our volume, valuation-wise, is going to be over $620 million this year in the building side. It was that last year. It's probably going to be that or more by probably 10%. So the volume of work on the building side, and you can just see it driving through the community, there's a lot of development activity taking place. Our revenues are about $1 million over the budget. So these are some of the things that you may be talking about Friday. Unfortunately, I will not be here. I'll be out of state, but I have a competent person to be there.
What about the balance between the long-range planners and the workers that you just identified? Is the long-range planning group overstaffed then?
No, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Starr, they're not overstaffed. They're staffed minimally at this point in time. The long-range planning really has the plans to move forward and to maintain and update those other plans that are out of date. 2020 is out of date by 2 years. So not just the 2020 plan, but there are many, many other plans that are behind schedule. Current planning has a pretty good, steady workload. Subdivision activity is up. Other development activity is up on the current planning side. So they're staffed. They're working hard to put the projects forward.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how your budget lies out. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. And Mr. Starr, just for information, we've scheduled the 24th for an overflow work session. So if we have questions that can't be answered this Friday, we can invite Mr. Weaver to join us then. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee.
No.
So by a vote of 8 yeas and 3 nays, that motion carries. That brings us to item 14G. I just want to reiterate, we actually do not have this item in front of us because we postponed it to our meeting in March. But this is the AO 2014-34, an ordinance amending the Anchorage zoning map to amend the PC district by adopting a master plan in accordance with AMC 21.40.250A3 for portions of the northeast one-quarter section of Section 17 T15 NR1W Sewer Meridian lying southeast of the Glen Highway in the Chugiak Community Council area. This is playing in zoning case 2013-68, and we will not be taking public testimony at this time, as we will be taking it up at our meeting of March 24. That then brings us to item 14H, AR 2014-261, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $225,000 to the Public Transportation Capital Improvement Project Fund 485 as an Alaska Community Transit reimbursable grant when tendered.
Waive reading.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. This is for public transportation projects. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing, hearing no one, public hearing is now closed. Ms. Domboski.
Oh, no, that wasn't me. I didn't touch anything.
Move to approve. Move to approve.
All right, Mr. Holland has moved to approve. Ms. Johnston has seconded. Is there any discussion? But must have been a ghost in the machine. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnston? All right, and that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14I, AR 2014-262, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $125,000 from the South Golden View Rural Road Service Area Fund 149, fund balance to the South Golden View RRSA Fund 149 2014 General Operating Budget, brought to us by the Public Works Department for the 2014 operating expenses for year-round road maintenance within the South Golden View RRSA. It's accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 579-2014. This is another public hearing. If you want to come speak to us, this is your chance. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is closed.
Move to approve.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. Can't wait to consolidate some of these, Mrs. Johnston. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And that motion carries unanimously, which brings us to item 14J, AR 2014-263, a resolution appropriating $308,433 from the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities to the State Direct Federal Pass-Through Grant.
Waive reading.
Thank you, sir. This is for AMAT's Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Traffic Signal Control Project. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward at this time. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Starr.
Our AMATS committee folks weigh in on stuff like this?
Mr. Starr, yeah, this is the money that we allocate under Table 8, I think. But this is basically, we use this to fund the municipal traffic department's signalization coordination projects.
Sure. Do you work their work plan, or is it just day-to-day operations on it? Eagle River Chugiak needs a little bit of attention in the signalization department. So don't ignore us, please.
Noted.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, long lights, nobody's sitting at them. I mean, there's just craziness going on out there with the traffic.
If you can give us a couple of specific data points that we can work with the department on, that'd be
We'll
helpful.
take some pictures, and then also the countdown timers, too, if this is part of it, would be surely helpful to have in some of those areas. Thank you.
We'd be happy to help with that. I see no one else in queue. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And that motion carries unanimously. That brings us to item 14K, AR 2014-264, a resolution appropriating $400,000 as a contribution from the Community Development Department 2014 Area-Wide General Operating Fund 101 to the Public Works Department Project Management Engineering Division Area-Wide General Capital Improvement Fund 401 for the Lower Ship Creek Connection PM&E Project 14-41, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 581-2014. This is a public hearing. If you wish to speak to us on the matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Seeing and hearing no one, please proceed to vote. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And that carries unanimously. We're now under special orders. Ms. Domboski, you want to take the lead on this one? Okay, I'll start. We have Resolution AR 2014-193, a resolution reconciling and levying special assessments for the Special Assessment District 1P03, which constructed road improvements to Marston and 4 Acre Drives, and setting the date of assessment installment payments, interest on unpaid assessments, and providing for penalties and interest in the event of delinquency, brought to us by the Public Works Department, accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 411-2014. And I believe, Ms. Domboski, you had a motion to postpone this item. From the 21st of October to the 13th of January.
That's exactly the motion I made.
That's what I thought you meant to do. Could you please press your button, ma'am? Thank you. May I have a second? And just for clarification, thank you very much, Mr. Trainee. Just for the clarification, for those who do not recall, this is an issue where we have a 3-person adjudicatory committee made up of Ms. Demboski, Mr. Trainee, and Mr. Evans. There's been some procedural delays, and once they are done with their adjudicatory process, which should take them about 2.5 days when they finally get to it, they'll be making a recommendation to us, and we will take that up under this item at that time.
Mr. Chairman, does this have overlap to Eberhart, rather?
Yeah, this is exactly what it is.
Yeah, so Mr. Starr, you're excused on this one.
I didn't hear anything.
So with that, please proceed to vote on the motion to postpone. Mr. Starr is abstaining. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. That carries by a vote of 10 yeas and 0 nays. That brings us to item 15B, AR 2014-194, a resolution reconciling assessments for the Turnagain Heights Water Improvement District 1416 and establishing the date of payment, interest on unpaid assessments, and providing for penalties and interest in the event of delinquency, brought to us by Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility, and accompanied by Assembly Memorandum 412-2014. Ms. Demboski.
Move to postpone to the same date.
That would be January 13. Thank you. Would you press your button, please? Moved and seconded. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr, you are abstaining. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
And I'm missing, there we are, 10 yeas and 0 nays. That motion carries. Final item under special orders is item 15C, AR 2014-195, a resolution reconciling assessments for the Turnagain Heights Lateral Improvement District 1415 and establishing the date of payment, interest on unpaid assessments, and providing penalties and interest in the event of delinquency, also from Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility, accompanied by AM 413-2014. Ms. Demboski.
I move to postpone to January 13th, 2015.
It's been moved and seconded. Please proceed to vote. Mr. Starr, you are abstaining. Mr. Trainee?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. And that brings us to almost the end of our agenda. This is audience participation. If you wish to speak to us on a matter that has not yet been addressed this evening, you are welcome to come forward this time. Seeing and hearing no one, Ms. Gray Jackson, may you please make me a motion? It's been moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seeing and hearing no objection,